Hey everyone, Jonathan Baylor here with another podcast, and actually our first breakfast podcast here. I'm joined early in the morning, West Coast time, with the famed Richard Nikoley, and I'm just so excited to chat with him. A fascinating story and a man after my own heart who takes not only looks at nutrition, but also looks a little bit deeper into the philosophy and asking bigger why questions. And I just love that. And I love to be sharing a virtual coffee with him and sharing our conversation with you today. So Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here, actually, and I'm excited at the work you're doing, which makes it particularly enjoyable.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Richard. Well, I want to just get started with, because I am fascinated about your story. I mean, you have a story, a bit of a transformational story, and I don't want to turn this into an Oprah episode, but I fear actually there's little risk of that. I don't think we're going to do that, but I'd love just for you to tell us about your story.
Well, it was, just briefly, and I've told it many times before. I'm a business guy, and I built a pretty nice business, stepped away from it to trade options full time, and got myself. I thought it would be fun and easy, but basically I ended up getting myself way stressed out with big money in play and swings here and there. And anyway, long story short, I ended up in 2007, weighing about 240 pounds and being miserable and, drinking a half bottle of whiskey a night and that sort of thing. And so, I went to the gym, and I actually stumbled on what was a pretty sane workout thing, intensity and endurance inversely related, kind of like Art Devaney. And someone actually pointed that out because I blogged about it in comments, and that's kind of where it took off with the whole evolutionary approach and so on. So over the next year and a half or so of just doing, a half an hour twice a week of mainly weightlifting, no cardio, and a lowish carb paleo type of diet, I took off about 60 pounds. And eventually, I was a blogger since 2003. So it was very easy for me to just, blog about that. And then I think it was around 2009, so 4 years ago, I basically converted the blog into just, blogging pretty much exclusively about paleo diet issues and exercise and so on, with the occasional foray into the, social commentary that I do. Then I got a little bit exuberant at the gym and somehow herniated a cervical disc, and the pain from that put me out of the gym for about a year, and I had 3 months of absolute 24/7 chronic pain in my right arm, lost huge amount of strength, right arm and shoulder, and consequently pretty much got really sloppy with the diet and self-medication, and and when you combine that, it's easier to eat in a non-proper way, and then ended up probably putting on about 15 to 20 pounds from that. And so the last, and every time I went to the gym to try it out, I'd end up right back in the same place again, although typically for a week or two of pain. But it's so intense and so excruciating 24/7, like you can't sleep and everything, that it scared me away. So I gave it a good long time. But in the last 6 months or so, I've been able to go, and I switched to doing a Doug McGuff Body by Science type of thing. The big five once per week, with the addition of deadlifts, because I love deadlifts. So call it the big six, I guess. and it works phenomenally. And I've gotten more and more disciplined with diet. So I'm kind of come full circle and basically doing what I used to do back in the beginning, and incorporating some intermittent fasting. It's quite interesting. So I will get back to where I was, slow and steady. So that's my story.
Well, I love that, Richard. And I love that you wrapped up there with the phrase slow and steady, because I feel like so much of what we see in especially the exercise arena, and especially nowadays, is all about this insane, crazy, like it's this fire and brimstone, just go run your body into the ground. And everyone who's on the TV advocating this is 22 and has their shirt off.
Well, and that was exactly what happened with paleo, because there is sort of an intellectual side to it as well, with a science intellectual side to it with the evolutionary background. It's far easier for young people, which are more accepting of the science of evolution. And so there was a lot of adopters in the young folks, and then the CrossFit gyms gradually went from a zone sort of protocol to a paleo. And the CrossFit gyms, the young people, they have all the energy in the world, and they really love to get out there and just, beat themselves up, which probably when you're in your 20s is no big deal. But then it kind of creates, I think, a false illusion. There's a redundancy. It creates this illusion that anybody can easily get to this ripped state. And, but everybody's different. And, you can even look at pictures of hunter gatherers, and people are different. Some have more body fat. The women particularly have more body fat, but, some of them even have a little bit of a little belly fat on them, and it doesn't mean that they're unhealthy or anything like that. It just means that bodies are different, and metabolism is different, and physiology is different, and it depends on what kind of depends on what your genetic lineage is as well. When they came out of Africa, did your ancestors turn left or right? And then after a while, did they go north or south? Yeah.
Well, I love that you brought up it creates this maybe a false impression, because don't get me wrong, like I love anything in the mainstream that helps move people towards not focusing on jogging on pavement for as long as you possibly can, and more towards an intensity focused workout, I think is beautiful. The other conflation, though, that I think sometimes people may see, and it may scare people off, and I'd love for us to address here to hopefully clear that up, is this false sense that to increase the intensity of one's workout, you also have to increase the risk or the danger, right? Because people look at CrossFit and they say, that's awesome. But I see CrossFit more as a sport. It's sort of, if someone were to say, I'm going to go box in a ring to get in shape, I'd say, well, you will get a good workout boxing. It's also going to do some other stuff to you. And those two, you can increase the intensity of your workout, as you know, from Doug McGuff and John Little's work, without increasing risk and actually decreasing risk. Oh yeah.
That's why I think that this sort of a workout, for me, it's like 20 minutes a week. I add a little bit of my own thing here and there, but basically I'm going in and doing 6 exercises, and one set, maybe 2, or I'll do one set super slow, and then a second set with a little bit more rhythm to it. And I don't feel this, sometimes I get done and I'm like, well, that couldn't have benefit me much. And then 2 days later, I'm sore all over,
Mm-hmm.
So, so it is deceiving because some people think that unless you leave the gym just completely wrung out, that you didn't get benefit. And I think the benefits are downstream, for the next few days. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that is not risky in terms of injuries, but will deliver you benefits for 2 or 3 days to come in terms of fat burning and muscle growth.
And I think that's really the key, Richard, is you hit on another way to phrase what you just said is the benefit to cost ratio. And we do this with medication all the time, right? We say, is the therapy going to cause more harm than good? And as you know, and I've torn my pec, I've torn my hip flexor, I've blown my knee out 3 times, I've torn my hamstring. These were all doing things. I used to play football, and these were all doing training for football or playing for football. And I was in great shape, but I'm very limited, and I'm a fairly young guy still, but I'm still fairly limited in what I can do now and what I can do for the rest of my life because of the approach I took early in my life. And that's because I was getting results, but I wasn't looking at the side effects that came along with those. And it's just neat to know that there's ways to exercise that can give you similar, if not superior results without any of those side effects.
Yeah, in one curious way, it's interesting, that I injured myself when I was for the very first time, because I'd worked out for like 3 years, twice a week for 2 or 3 years, and never had an injury, and then bam, and I was 49. But imagine if I had sustained something like that when I was in my early 20s. Now that would really suck, because those injuries at an early age, I think, by the time you do get to be 50 years old, might, come back to haunt you. So you want to really be careful if you're young.
Absolutely. So here's a wholehearted endorsement. So I blew my knee out for the first time when I was 18, for a second time when I was 19, and for a third time when I was 20. At this point, I actually don't have an anterior cruciate ligament in my right knee because I didn't get the third surgery because the first 2 didn't work. So I said, well, the answer is just to stop doing what I was doing to tear it rather than fixing it and continue to do that. And I have no meniscus in that knee as well because I just had to take it out. And it's a challenge because I feel that at some point, so if it happens when you're young, speaking from experience, that's really, really no fun. And you're really rolling the dice. I feel there's only so many hits the body can take before, maybe for some people it's a 1 in 1 million chance. Maybe for some people it's 1 in 1,000 chance. But it's just the more time you expose your body to a risky situation, sooner or later, hopefully later, it's going to catch up to you. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and also, I would say that when you're young, you tend to more easily, slough off injuries. Oh well, injuries happen, so on. Whereas in my case, being a little older and perhaps wiser, that really woke me up because it was like, I can't live like this. There's just no way, And so, I am now very, very careful with what I do because I just don't want to go down that road again. It was very miserable.
Well, I think it's an interesting distinction too, Richard, to make the distinction between I'm doing this for pleasure or for athletic enjoyment, or I'm doing this for my health. Because if we're doing it for our health, if our goal is I'm going to go in to improve my health, then doing anything that can cause damage to our health is counterproductive. Now, if you love boxing or you love jogging because it's just the way you achieve flow, and CrossFit does the same thing for you, I say go do that, but let's call it what it is. Let's call it athletics. Let's call it a hobby. Let's not call it healthy exercise.
Exactly. And I kind of harkened back to one of those light bulb moments, back reading Art Devaney, or Devaney, way back when, and talking about aerobics and jogging and, treadmills and stuff like that. He said something to the effect that, and I actually quoted that in the latest version of my little, book on paleo. And it's like your heart is not a diesel engine sitting in a basement generating electricity at a steady state forever, on and on. Your heart is a very, dynamic organ that's supposed to have spikes and everything. It's not supposed to be just doing the same thing for a long, long, long period of time. And I'm like, that's right. We walk, we sit, we lay down, we sprint and everything. But this idea of going out and jog, unless you're a specialist persistence hunter that runs down a ruminant over a day or two, what is the possible evolutionary use for jogging? Mm-hmm. I just don't get it.
But I love your analogy there of the diesel engine and the heart. And I think it was in McGuff and Little's excellent work, Body by Science. They talked about people generally see aerobic conditioning as being so critical to heart health. But when you think about a heart attacks usually happen when you are under a spike in stress. It's not you're running a marathon and then you have a heart attack at the end because your heart wasn't in good enough shape. It's more that there was this massive stress placed upon the heart that it couldn't handle. So if you want to avoid that, doing almost like little immunizations, like low doses of intensity onto the heart really help to protect it against exactly that.
Right.
And I just think that's so fascinating because we talk about this just almost monotonous beating of the heart, and it's just the cost benefit isn't there. So, well, Richard, one other thing that I wanted to ask you about was, I know you do some great work just in terms of how humans think and perception, and I love some of your commentary there. And you mentioned something earlier about you leave the gym, staying on the topic of exercise, you leave the gym and you're like, how could so little do so much? And one analogy I think it's a function of human perception, and I'd love your take on it. One analogy I've tried to use to explain this when I speak to people is, imagine, I don't like to use pills because some of these pills have a bad connotation around them, but we don't look at the size of a pill and think that is in any way indicative of its potency. It's not as if you had a pill the size of a baseball, you'd be like, that pill right there, that's going to make me better. But that little pill, no way. Right. But we do make that perception in the gym, for lack of better terms.
Yeah. Well, and the same sort of thing applies to poisons, or toxins. The dose makes the poison. So it's a whole spectrum of things, and it's our perception is wildly different. I mean, and it's the whole spectrum of things. Like chances are. As big as it is, an elephant isn't going to harm you if you don't get right up in its face. But a teeny little spider or a snake, that can kill you. Mm-hmm. So it is a perceptive thing, probably, from our reptile brain or something like that, where size out in the wild, size is a good size, or mass or stature are some good tools to take into account, but they don't mean everything.
And I think that's a wonderful distinction there, is that sometimes things can seem to make sense. Like on the surface, look out your window, it makes sense that the world is flat. Like that theory makes a lot of sense. In fact, if you told me the world was round, what? People would fall off the bottom of it.
Right.
But we can't always take things at first glance. We've got to look at what's actually been proven and the actual research behind it. So
exactly.
And that's, I think, is one of the beautiful things about what you do, is you combine a I think, more of an instinctual approach with also more of a scientific and philosophic rigor. And I think that's the key, because you always do want to pass the sniff test. Like, wait a second, that just commonsensically doesn't make any sense. And I think you could do both of those, which is just great.
Right. Well, and a final point I would add is that, going to some of the social philosophy that I also blog about, is that people are creatures of learning, and, they tend to think that this makes sense because I think it. My argument is, no, you don't. You're regurgitating what you learned, and so when you look at social structures and top-down authoritarian hierarchies, people tend to just regard that as the given. Yet, if you look at the human evolution, we evolved to account for the values and actions of about 30 to 60 other people. And we did have social organization and social structure. We had leaders within those tribes and so on. My argument is it does not scale to 300 million.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that might be some of the reason that we see a lot of the unfortunate things that we see today is that disconnection there.
Right.
Well, I love it. Well, Richard, I wanted to close just hearing what's next for you. I mean, you've been making some awesome contributions for quite some time now. What's next?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because the last few days I've written a couple posts on my blog, freetheanimal.com, on how I am changing things. Blogging about paleo became a little bit restrictive for me, partly because of the social stuff that I talk about as well. And so, like, for the Ancestral Health Symposium last August, I actually did a presentation on social epistemology and socialism. And so that's an interest. The diet and health is an interest. I'm also a business guy that's had a financial services firm for 20 years. So I want to talk about things like that, debt, finance, money issues, things like that. I have a pretty good lifestyle, and I do some fun things in terms of travel and things. So, I want to blog about lifestyle, and some of the social stuff. So I have basically split my blog into those sections. And I have, RSS feeds and email delivery for, you can get everything or you can get, any part of it, because some people love some things I talk about and hate other things. So now they don't have to whine anymore, because they can just get what they want. So that's really the next step. So I still will be blogging about, substantially about health and fitness and some of my evolving ideas in that, I'm not as, I still on an average am pretty low carb, but like some days, I eat significant amount of starches, and it hasn't bothered me at all. Dairy, I have incorporated dairy, particularly post workout, be it, yogurt, cottage cheese, whole milk, things like that. And I've seen really good stuff from that. And I say, hey, if you don't have a problem with the lactose, why not use it? I laugh at the idea of like, well, Paleo man didn't have milk. Well, yeah, they didn't have a lot of things. Evolution didn't stop 10,000 years ago. So, there was an evolution to allow the continued digestion of lactose. So why not, if you can use it, and it doesn't harm you. So, blogging about all that kind of stuff, is how it's going to go forward.
But I love the Paleolithic man didn't have access to a lot of things, because I often think that myself is, I'm reading a blog, maybe a more extreme blog, and it's making these claims, and I'm saying, well, Paleolithic man didn't have a blog either. So I'm like, the rule can't be if Paleolithic person didn't have it, it's bad. Right. That can't be the rule. So, and the other thing you mentioned that I really appreciated is, and this is something that you'll see more out of me and hopefully other people as well, if we can get this started, is this, and I love your commentary because of your experience in the social arena, is it's fun to pick teams and it's fun to make extreme, unwavering claims, but as you're experiencing, the human body is a very diverse thing, and it seems like there's some common truths, like processed sweeteners are bad and refined starches are bad and processed fats are bad. All these engineered things, those are poison, and we probably should stick away from them. But if we could somehow just unite around a more basic and fundamental set of principles so that we can maybe affect some more change in the mainstream, because I just struggle, I continue to struggle, and would love your insights on, it seems like it's human nature to pick teams, and it seems like it's human nature to focus on what we disagree on rather than what we agree on. But if we want to save lives, which is really what we're talking about here, and if we want to affect the mainstream, I feel like we've got to unite as a community. What do you think?
That's it. And that's another big change going forward, because I just blogged about this a few days ago. I am kind of a ranter and potty mouth, on my blog, or have been. And I, became embroiled in a few different controversies, last year. And, I came to realize how silly it was, because you are, it's the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule to say, people, it's funny how people tend to focus on the, maybe, 5 to 20% of something that may be questionable, controversial, or even wrong, and ignore the 80%, which I could say in this context is the paleo diet framework. Not reenactment. It's a framework. It's an evolutionary framework in which you try to evaluate modern things to say, is this going to be beneficial to me? And so I got off track. So I can see how anybody can. And I'm looking at it. I'm saying, now there's all this dispute between, low carb and paleo this and science over fructose, whether it's really is bad, or is it the dose makes the poison sort of thing, and Taubes and Jimmy Moore and marketing and so on and so forth, all these things that people are like you say, choosing teams or assembling into tribes and so on, throwing spears at each other. And some people, that's literally all they do. They don't contribute one thing to helping anybody, because you don't help anybody by saying, nope, that's wrong, because you can find something wrong in something everybody is doing and saying, right? So if you focus on that, rather than, this guy is doing, 80% plus right. He's actually helping people. You can see it, right? So why do I want to try and undercut that? It's the same thing with the simple initiative, and criticism like, oh, it's not simple. Well, you know what? Yes, it is. and you know what? It should be. And if it's complicated, then someone's complicating it for complexity's sake to put themselves up as an authority, rather than saying, here, let me show you how to make it simple for you, and then you don't need me anymore. You can stick around. You can be my fan and cheerlead me and help others, like in my comments. A lot of people don't get, they maybe get some help from me, but then they go into the comments threads, which go sometimes to 200-300, posts, and they get a lot of help from other people that have a similar thing. Why does somebody want to undercut that? I don't get it. And so to the extent I've been involved in drama, I've done a disservice to the people who've read me for a long time. And, it's no more. I'm going to be focusing on everybody out there in the general sane, real food, low carb, paleo, ancestral, Weston Price, all these people out there who are really doing good things to help people. And that's going to be my focus.
Oh, I got a little bit of chills there, because that makes me so happy, because I just can't tell you how much sleep I've lost after we see. I mean, there's just so much brilliance out there in the groups you just mentioned. There's so much brilliance and so much great science. And then, but what some people I think may lose sight of is there one celebrity who makes some calorie counting traditional American diet quote in Shape magazine. That's who we're up against. We're
right.
not up against each other.
Yes.
And the only way, even the biggest names in this, let's call it internet world, I mean, if you look at the Twitter followers, it's still 1/20th. Oh yeah. You combine them all of this. So it's unless we come together, I really don't feel like we stand a chance against the mainstream.
Yeah. It's like I used to use this analogy in my financial business, because we're in kind of a very niche sort of financial, focusing on restructuring debt and so on for small companies and eventually individuals, even settling debt with creditors. And, initially there was like, it was a very small thing back in the early 90s, and people started talking about, oh, well, don't tell them your secrets, competition. And I'm like, imagine that you're the very first real estate agent, right? And then some people say, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to be a real estate agent too. So eventually across the United States, you have like 25, 50 real estate agents, and you start fighting with each other instead of looking at how many properties there are to sell. Right?
Yep.
So that's kind of what we're talking about. We're talking about going against what's really bad. So instead of going against everyone who's got it 80% plus right, and focusing on this 5 to 20% that may be questionable or controversial or even wrong, how about realize that whole thing is but, I don't know, just pick a number, 5% of the total, 5% or less of the total health and fitness, diet, health, fitness stuff out there, and realize what an enormous potential we have, because it actually is simple and it should be simple.
I love it. Hallelujah, brother. Well, where can people go to learn more about the man, the myth, and the legend, Richard Nikoley?
It's simple. freetheanimal.com. That's it. You find everything there. I've been blogging since 2003. There's 3,500 posts, and there's about 70,000 comments from readers. Very deep archives. It's in terms of diet and fitness stuff and food porn. You're talking, probably half of those posts almost are about that. So there's plenty to read there. There's a book, how-to book, that's in version 2 that we did, a few months back. And it's, it's like $8 or something like that. It's no big deal. And I've got some how-to videos, as well, on there. So, for anyone interested in my take on it, that's where you go, freetheanimal.com.
I love it, Richard. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope we can do it again, brother.
Thank you for keeping it simple.
My pleasure. I'll talk to you soon, Richard.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.